Hey everyone, my name is Charlie and today I have a review of Mystic Orchards by Jonathan Koven. I was contacted by Isabel Kenyon of Kenyon Author Services to be part of the blog tour, but all opinions of this book are my own. I find this poetry collection difficult to describe because it is one that deals with so much. It also deals with a lot of metaphor and imagery that at first glance I would sometimes not understand, but I found that taking my time over the poems was perhaps the best way to absorb the work here. This is not a poetry collection that you can just read in one sitting and put it to the side and think, well, there we go, that's done, I've read some poetry for the day. This is a collection that asks you to take the time to mull over the way in which the poet has constructed their work in order to achieve what they want to achieve. This collection is separated into parts. At the beginning of most of these parts, you get to see a short piece of prose that connects the poems in a certain way. It's almost as though each section is discussing a different aspect of what the poet wants to discuss within these poems. So that might be family, it could be religion, it could be politics, it could be nature, it could be the destruction of the natural world. Something that I found when I talk about the metaphor and the imagery within this is that at first glance, it can be like, well, what are you getting at? But if you give it that time, you recognise that actually that's a great way of putting it and very much a unique take that has that sense of it's unique to the author, it's unique to the poet, yet it makes sense and would sometimes have me nodding my head thinking, I would never have thought to have said this in this way, but that makes sense and you've captured it perfectly. One aspect of this collection that I also liked was the way that these poems would connect to each other. So occasionally we would see reoccurring words, we would see reoccurring themes, reoccurring characters, and it added this sense of the personal to the poetry collection. And there can be an issue sometimes in poetry where poems become too personal. They reach this point where the tales that are being told, the words on the page, are so personal to the poet that the reader is unable to actually have any sort of empathy or sympathy to that. That was not the case here because it was almost like a universal personal thing in which the poet is sharing experiences and the reader is able to empathise with that due to the fact that the poet didn't make it too obtuse. There is a philosophy within these poems that is specific to this poet, and I like to see that. As I say, this is a collection that asks for the reader to take their time to think about what the author is saying. One thing that I always like in poetry is the way in which words are used together in order to create a specific sound. And sometimes I can get lost in that. And I did find that happening occasionally as a reader thing. But I like that because, you know, I love words and I really enjoyed and appreciated the way that Jonathan Koven put these words together and created these different sounds. And as I say, there were occasions where I saw words put together that I would never have concocted in the same sentence before. But it also meant going back and rereading the poems and just really acknowledging what this poet had to say. There were moments of the polemic within these poems. There were moments of heartbreak and other dark moments within here, but I feel like it was almost like travelling through these poems in search of the glimpses of joy because they were there. There is occasionally a playfulness to the language and an enjoyment and this experiment of ways in which certain sounds work together. It was engaging. It was like memoir met fantasy in the poetic form, and I was here for it. That's all I've got to say about it, really. This is a poetry collection that bears rereading, and if you don't mind giving yourself over to poems and allowing your body just to absorb and mull and think, then you will really appreciate this collection as well. And that is Mystic Orchards by Jonathan Koven. Very grateful to both the author and Isabel Kenyon for contacting me and allowing me to read this work. And I hope that a few more folk pick it up and explore a collection of poetry that was written in a style in which I've not seen in a long while and which I very much appreciated. So yeah, if you have read this book and would like to discuss it, then please feel free to do so in the comments. Alternatively, if you think you will read this book now, then let me know. I hope that you've enjoyed this video, and until next time, that is